Hi, I'm Chasma Smith, founder of Try and Conquer, an inclusive platform connecting Black, Indigenous women of color to local outdoor activities as a healing modality to manage and conquer health and wellness challenges in our app, which is accessible at tryxconquer.app. For the past 5 days, we've dived deep into some amazing conversations with mental health and fitness professionals, outdoor experts, and adventure enthusiasts in our inaugural Women in Wellness Summit. Today is the last day of the summit, and we're excited to be joined by Jeannette. Jeannette is the founder of Strategy Every Day, a consulting practice that develops game changing strategies for growth stage companies. She has spent her career leveraging a strategic mindset in order to tackle complex problems across a variety of industries with a particular focus on financial technology. Prior to Founder Life, she served in roles as the Vice President of Integration in Technology at BNY Mellon and as the Vice President within the Chief Operating Office of Bank of America's Global Banking Division Technology. Today, she'll share how she beat self limiting beliefs, left a cushy Fortune 500 job, started her own business, and sailed around the Greek islands all in 1 year and before learning to swim. Before we dive into the session, if you joined a little bit late, I would like to invite the folks who joined to introduce yourself in the chat and drop any comments or questions you have there as well. Happy International Women's Day, Jeanette. Thank you so much for joining.
Yes, happy International Women's Day. Thank you so much for having me on this day. It's fantastic.
Yeah, what a great way to wrap up this summit. It's been an amazing 5 days, as I mentioned, but really, really excited to get into the meat of the session today. So, I gave you a little brief introduction, but can you, in your own words, tell us about who you are?
Sure. Yeah. And I'll try to make it I'll give you as much of a summary as I can because I've kind of had an interesting journey throughout various fields and different countries and things like that. So I actually got my bachelor's degree in New York at Columbia University, where I majored in French. And then I moved to France and did a master's in finance. So that's where the finance came in at. And
Okay.
and then I stayed in France for 4.5 years. Some of that doing my master's and some of that working. So I started my career in finance in France. And I was working at asset management firms, also private equity. And then I wanted to fill out my analytical toolkit. So at that point, I was in France, I was working in private equity. I felt like I had quite a good grasp of how to analyze things from a financial mindset, but in an economic mindset. But I knew that there were other ways of seeing the world, not just through an economic lens. So I wanted to explore those other analytical tools. And so I went to Sweden and I did another master's degree in sustainable development. And a lot of that brought in various subjects and various fields, ranging from environmental economics to earth sciences to social science. And I guess the thing that tied it together the most was the emphasis on interdisciplinary practice and decision science and how you can look at an issue from multiple angles and analyze it and use data, different kinds of data, in order to assess, what your next best move is given a situation that is complex and ambiguous, as most situations within sustainability are. So it was a fantastic, I spent 2 years in Sweden. It was really life-changing for that reason, because there are very few academic programs that allow you to really just learn how to think about things in non-conventional ways. And it's such a valuable skill, I think. And that critical thinking, especially these days, I find is an incredibly great skill to have. And it's a useful skill as an entrepreneur to have. And that was an enriching experience because of that. And so then once I finished my master's in Sweden, I moved to London and I went back into finance, and I was working at BlackRock, which is the largest investment management firm in the world. And I was on a team that was managing investment strategies and executing investment strategies for BlackRock's largest clients. So, for example, central banks that need help with investing their assets and also managing their liabilities will come to our team in order to have their investments and their liabilities managed. as well as pension funds of government agencies and things like that. So it was a really international team ranging from different countries. I worked across different countries. It was a really cool experience. However, that was when I first got my entrepreneurship bug. So I actually, because at BlackRock, the team was very forward thinking, and BlackRock as a company, I find it tended to be forward thinking on the technology side of things. So I got really into technology, and I started teaching myself how to code after work. And that was the first, I think probably my first experience of breaking through a self-limiting belief was that, technology is only for a certain subset of people, and if you don't learn how to be a computer scientist at school, like you can never really get into technology. And so I just started like tinkering around with code after work and doing these sort of like online programs that they have. And so that was my first experience with the kind of breaking through a self-limiting belief. And it was really fun. And I decided that, hey, this technology thing is something that I want to continue to explore. But at the time, well, and even today still, it's quite hard to go into a whole new field while you're in one position. So I was like an investment strategist, and that's what people saw me as. They didn't see me as a technologist. And so it's quite hard to, even if you can do it, it's quite hard to all of a sudden say, hey, I taught myself this. I am now a technologist. Please, can I have a technologist job? So what I had to do was actually just do it myself. So I left my job so that I could start advising fintech startups. And that was how I basically like brute forced my way into becoming a technologist. And so I started a business that ended up focusing on cryptocurrency and blockchain. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then by the time I had gotten like a couple of years of experience as a technologist specializing in financial technology, then I transitioned back into the corporate world for a couple of years. And that's when I worked at Bank of America and BNY Mellon. This time now I was accepted as a technologist because I had proven myself by myself that I was capable of doing it. And so I was, kind of overseeing various teams of technologists as they were developing platforms for equity trading, fixed income trading at Bank of America, and then later at BNY Mellon. I was leading the launch of a new product that would help wealth management technology. And then I got, I feel like it's once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. I got that itch again. And so now I'm on my second run of leaving the corporate world in order to start my own thing. And this time I am helping people kind of who were like me the first time I tried entrepreneurship, who are at a stage where they know they're capable of something and they've probably started it, but they just need a little extra help getting over that next hurdle and like figuring out how they can really take their business to the next level. So that's where I'm at now.
Wow, thank you so much. This is exactly why I ask for people to describe themselves in their own words, because a bio only goes so far, right? We have limited character space that we can summarize our entire life, career and personal journeys, and that's amazing. I love that you shared it. I had no idea that you did all this stuff. Like, I knew you were amazing, but I had no idea, like from Sweden to all, like you have so much experience, and I think people will get so much out of this session. And one thing I want to also agree with and touch on is that entrepreneurial itch, it does not go away. And I love that you're supporting entrepreneurs and helping them with the things that they need in order to take that next step and go forward, because this whole session is about like self-limiting beliefs. As an entrepreneur, you can absolutely get in your own way, especially if you're a female entrepreneur, and then like adding other intersections of who you are into that. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to get into all. So let's do just that. Let's call a thing and identify exactly what are self-limiting beliefs in your words. What is that?
Yeah, so for me, and I think more broadly, the generally accepted definition of a self-limiting belief, it's something that you believe about yourself. So like a perception that you believe about yourself, or a perception that you have about how the world works. And you have this perception and you see it as reality. So for you, this is not just a belief, it's what the reality actually is. And so it's holding you back from doing the things you want to do, because this reality that it actually only exists in your head is telling you that you won't be able to do it for whatever reason, or that's not how the world works, so you're not going to succeed. So that's what a self-limiting belief is to me.
Thank you. So let's dive deeper into that, right? So many self-limiting beliefs start in childhood. I know they did for me, and those are things that I am to this day actively unlearning and working to untangle. What are some things that you were told you couldn't or shouldn't do as a kid, and which of those, if any, carried over into adulthood?
Yeah. So I think one of the reasons why self-limiting beliefs are so tricky is that until it's kind of like the matrix, like until you're out of it, you don't even realize
Yeah.
it's actually shaping every single thing you do in your life, you know? And usually people don't actually like, it doesn't click for them until you're kind of like in your, or at least for me, and I notice people around me, friends, colleagues, it doesn't really click until you're in your like mid 20s to mid 30s, depending on sort of when you start this concept of like self-discovery, that you realize you've actually been holding yourself back for a large portion of your life due to these things, these boxes you've been put in. And you know, as a child, you're usually put into some boxes. You're put into boxes at school, you're put into boxes with your friends and your family. And so for me, the box I was put into was that I was a smart person, which is great. Like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And it's something that I still like, you know, it's part of my identity. I like to be seen as someone who is an intellectual, and I enjoy that. But growing up, for me, it was also incredibly limiting, because as a smart person, you never want to be seen as incapable of doing something, or you never want to be seen as not being able to do something. And also, it was in opposition, my brand that I had developed for myself kind of as a child and in high school was like a smart person in opposition to athletic people. So in the mind in opposition to the body. Like, and I actually carried that well into my 20s. Like, you could either be one or the other, mind or body, not both. And so I grew up kind of believing that I wasn't an athletic person, that I couldn't be an athletic person, that people are born like with mental capabilities or physical capabilities, and you can never change it. So if I'm not good at sports, if I can't run, if I can't swim, I'm just never going to be able to do that. And then it sort of, it reinforces itself, because then you don't run, you don't swim. So of course you're not going to get better at it. And so it just sort of becomes this vicious cycle of a self-limiting belief that reinforces itself, because you're not putting yourself out there and you're not going to practice it. So of course you're bad at it.
I'm nodding along because all of it just resonates with me personally. It really does perpetuates this cycle of like, you won't, you don't fit this box of what that person looks like.
Exactly.
Even with
like
being
boxes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. It is. You have to fit in a box, otherwise people can't recognize it.
Exactly.
With being outdoors, even that, like, that's something that that you're thinking about, like the marketing around like what an adventurer or what does a hiker or something look like. It typically doesn't look like me. Like, it's not a black small frame woman of color. It's usually not the opposite of that. So yeah, all of those things you really have to actively work to impact, and it that can impact the way you show up in the world.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that. It reminds me of like just like when I was forming, like you form an image of yourself when you're 11, 12, 13. And around that time, ironically, is like when I started eating glasses. And so like I remember like making conscious decisions to be like, okay, I'm going to be like the glasses girl. I'm going to, read. I mean, and I loved reading. So I was like, a lot of these things, I do wear glasses and I do love reading. And so I was like, I'm going to be, that's who I am. And then like that person does not look like the person who is like killing it on the kickball field, and then it reinforces it, because I wasn't very good at kickball and I couldn't really kick because I'd never really tried it before. So it just, and then it's like because I was like seeing myself as that person, I didn't want to embarrass myself, basically. And as an adolescent, you're always trying to protect yourself from being embarrassed. So why would I go out and try to like hit a ball or like kick a ball and risk embarrassing myself when I could be like fully cool in my own way if I stayed in my lane. So that was kind of like, it's all these like adolescent dynamics that get like formed when you're pretty young, but that impacts you well into adulthood.
Absolutely. That's a perfect segue to this next question is how were those self-limiting beliefs impacting your success and happiness?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I mean, so just in a very simple way of not feeling comfortable in my body, feeling like I wanted to be able to be a coordinated person and be seen as someone who could like kick a ball or throw a ball, or even just like, swim, but not feeling comfortable, feeling like my body wasn't actually cooperating with what I would want to do. And so I couldn't even try it because it would be embarrassing to even try. And a lot of it, you mentioned kind of like people like who kind of generally look like a small frame Black women aren't what's being presented as like who could be super athletic. And I totally feel that. And I feel that even to the extent of like hair was a huge issue in terms of like, so specifically since we're going to kind of talk about learning how to swim and all of that, learn like the ability to be able to have hair that's easy to deal with is sort of in opposition to being able to learn how to swim. So even something silly like that, and then people call it silly, like, oh, you're worried about your hair. Like, I remember this as an adolescent as well, like people kind of like making fun of me because I didn't want to get my hair wet. And we all know what happens if you have relaxed hair and you get it wet. Like, it's just, and it seems silly at the time, but it has like these reverberations well into adulthood of like, then when I was an adult and I wanted to learn how to swim and I was in the professional world, I'm like, oh, what about my hair? Like, how can I take swimming lessons and go to work the next day if I have to worry about like what my hair is going to look like? So it's at a very surface level, these sort of concerns about what it means to be a physical person and how that affects you, depending on like, your the type of person you are, your hair, what your image is. It's very hard to kind of have all of these balls in the air of like, I need to look professional. As a Black woman, I can't get my hair wet. I'm going to have to take swimming lessons. So I have to kind of like figure something out. And so you really learn that everything's kind of a trade-off. Like if I want to get over a self-limiting belief about what I'm physically capable of, I might have to be uncomfortable in other ways. So you're never going to be 100% happy, but you kind of learn to accept the process, and like the process of being slightly uncomfortable with things, feeling like you're not always confident. That whole process is a journey that ultimately takes you to something that's even better. So you're kind of giving up your momentary comfort and your momentary like sense of familiarity with how the process is going. And in return, you get a whole new vision of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to get uncomfortable if you want to get to that thing that if I feel like if it's something that you really want to do, and something that keeps you up or something that keeps coming up in your life as like, oh, I might be good at it or I might suck at it. I just want to try it. I just want to do it. You've got to kind of reckon with that uncomfortable feeling and work past those self-limiting beliefs. So you touched on this a little bit, but I think I'm still going to ask anyway. When did you realize those beliefs were really impacting you and your quality of life?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the way I grew up was to try to just stay in my lane because that's where I felt comfortable and confident. And I felt like if I could master just one thing, I could kind of ignore the rest of everything else. Even if I was interested in other things, like I was just going to ignore it because I wasn't 100% sure that I would be successful. And that worked up until my mid 20s, so at that point, I'm kind of, in my cushy job. I'm thinking about, okay, well, what's next? How can I grow in new ways? Because up until that point, from the time you're a little kid, up until the time you kind of get on your path in life, you're just thinking about, okay, I want to succeed. I want to finally get there. There's like a destination in your head, right? And you're like, okay, as soon as I get there, I can relax. And so I got there and then I realized, oh, I still have to like live the rest of my life. Now what am I going to do? And so it was at that point that I realized, oh, actually, we never stop growing. We're always going to be changing, always going to be interested in new things. And just because I was successful at one thing doesn't mean that I'm never going to want to try other things. And so I started getting really into personal development and growth mindset. I guess it was kind of like probably a quarter life crisis thing that a lot of people have, where you start asking yourself, okay, well, what's next? Like, what's more to life than what I have already achieved? And so that was kind of a turning point in my mid-20s. And at the same time as I was sort of investigating what it means to grow as a person and have a growth mindset, around me, I was seeing colleagues. So, this is sort of a very, like it's kind of like a fancy job, and people who are in their mid-20s and even younger who are saying to me, oh, well, I'd love to be able to do X, Y, Z, but it's too late for me now. I can't. And like someone who's in their early 20s who sees themselves as it's too late for them to ever try anything new ever in their life. And this, to me, it just hit me really hard. Like, that's quite tragic, actually, to think like by the time you're in your mid-20s, 23, 24, 25, like your life is over, you're on a set path, like nothing's ever going to change for you ever again, so you better just live the rest of your like 60 years on earth, like you just grin and bear it. So I didn't see that as I just thought, why do people think that? And it kind of goes back to what we were saying. It's because of society and the boxes that you're put in. So once you're put into like the corporate ladder box, that's kind of like, well, that's it, pack it in. Like, I'm just going to do this for the rest of my life. And for some people who want to do that, that's fantastic. But that doesn't mean that that's the right choice for everyone. And so I really began to question whether or not that was the right choice for me. Once I got there, is this where I see the rest of my 40 to 50 years in the workforce being? And for me, the answer was no, for a couple of reasons. One was because of that, the fact that I didn't want to just be one thing for the rest of my life. And the other thing was just fundamentally, what I believe about the corporate world and the image conscious nature of the corporate world, and how you kind of have to be really conscious of how you're perceived. And I just it didn't sit well with me. So that was kind of my first, trigger point of like, okay, I need to sort of see what else is out there where I can really embrace the multifaceted person that I am, and how I can bring different elements of myself together and still be satisfied and feel like I can grow as a person, and even still be successful. So it was really about like me trying to define what my definition of success was. And I think a lot of people in their 20s are trying to figure out what their definition of success is. And it's very hard when society has like a few definitions of success. There's kind of like 5 things in society you can do to be successful, right? And so it's very hard to like break out of that and create your own definition, because it feels very lonely, and it feels like you're crazy, and everyone's telling you you're crazy. But that was kind of like the journey I went on from between like 25 and 30.
Yeah, no, all of what you're saying is like so true. There is this idea of this path, and I think what it is the reason why people kind of subscribe to this like normal path of success is because it's proven to have worked, right? And so if you're deviating from that, then you're the anomaly. But when you're on this path to get there, whatever there is, and you're on this path, I think for me, like the biggest life lesson that I learned, like from working, in tech companies and corporate America, and then like deviating pretty hard, like taking a really hard turn, is like the path doesn't exist until you create it or change it, right? Like the path, you're going on it, but you can only see so far, and you get to decide which way that path goes. So like it's just very interesting to have being on the other side of working through some self-limiting beliefs. I'm like, oh yeah, I create my own path, and you've created your own path. There is no one size fits all. So speaking about this path and charting it, what beliefs did you have to quiet in order to embark on this path of journeying around the Greek islands?
Yeah, so definitely. So I think a few different, it's funny because as you mentioned in your intro, this all kind of happened within a year span, so all at the same time. And at the time, I didn't see them as being related, but looking back, I'm like, they had to have been related because I was basically reforming my whole image of myself, my whole like beliefs about myself were changing. Like I had always been the path person. I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to kind of achieve what everyone else thought I should be achieving, and live up to everyone else's beliefs about what I should be achieving and what success looks like. And also live up to everyone's beliefs about what I was capable of, you know, physically. And so I kind of like smashed through all of that in 1 year. And the first thing was, I'm not an outdoors person. That was kind of like, you know, the first self-limiting belief that even before the entrepreneurial thing, I started taking swimming lessons because it's funny. I mean, when I try to think about why I started at first taking swimming lessons, it was just because I felt like there was like this little voice inside of me that said, hey, this is something you've always wanted to do. And it was something I had always wanted to do. And I was just afraid because I don't know. I don't even know why. It just wasn't me. It wasn't something that was like, I felt like I could do. I felt like, you know, you either had to learn when you were a little kid or you could never learn how to swim properly. And that gets reinforced because like throughout the years, telling people I can't swim and they give you this face like, oh my gosh, you must be like an alien from outer space. You can't swim. So it just kind of gets reinforced that you're different, you're weird. And you know, that it becomes harder to overcome because it becomes part of your sort of self-limiting belief that you're like some weirdo who is just always going to be limited in that way. So little by little, I took a beginning swimming lesson, and I was actually quite good compared to everyone else. And so that little first bump of confidence of like, oh, I'm actually good at floating. Like, and it's just little baby steps like that of like, oh, like everyone can float. I mean, a human being, if you know, as long as you relax your body, like every human being is capable of floating. And just that little realization of, okay, so as long as I'm a human being, I am capable of floating. Okay, I can do this. Now I just have to kind of get the arms and the legs in there. Okay, that's like the first step. And then I kept taking like different swimming lessons from different people. And I like the thing you said about different paths, because I feel like whatever you're doing, whether it's in your career or learning a new skill, it's really important to realize that there are different ways of learning things. And I think that a lot of times, the first time you try to learn something, and if it doesn't gel right away, you automatically give up. You're like, oh, see, I knew I wasn't good at this. Like I knew it wasn't going to work. I am bad at swimming. But it might have just been that particular instructor or the method they were using just didn't like gel with you. So I kept taking different lessons from different instructors until I found a method that really like resonated with me, that like physically it made sense in my brain. And that was the other thing I learned, was that physical capabilities are as much about mind as they are about body, which is something that it really, like I had to click in my head of like, swimming isn't as much about like telling your brain to coordinate in a certain way as it is about being like physically capable, and also like building the muscle. That was another thing that I didn't really realize, was that sometimes you have to build the muscle first, and that happens with practice. So just because you can't do it right the second, you build the muscle, you build the little neural paths in your brain, you keep doing it, and like a few months later, it's going to click. But you have to kind of get over that hump of your mind telling you you're never going to be able to do it first. So it was like these baby steps. So baby steps, trying different ways with different instructors, that really helped me to learn how to swim. And then, when a friend did actually invite me to go sailing, which is something I never would have considered before, because again, like I can't even swim. Why would I possibly go sailing? I lived on a sailboat for 2.5 weeks. Like that's insane. It's still insane to me, because I think there's still a little bit of that self-limiting belief in my brain of like, whoa, what? Like I wasn't on land for 2.5 weeks. I mean, we stopped on land, but we were like living in the boat. And so just taking those baby steps so that you are prepared for opportunity when it arises, I think that's critical. It's never going to be like one big leap. Like you can never just automatically get over a self-limiting belief, but it's like these little baby steps that you take and like you chip away at it so that when a big opportunity presents itself, then you're ready for it.
So perfectly worded. Yes, I have felt that way many times in life. And fun fact, I am also someone who's, well, you have learned how to swim. I still haven't learned how to do that. I'm in the process of doing it, and it is definitely one of those things that you have to take baby steps and quiet your mind and just like every little thing that you accomplish is like celebrate that big win so that you can keep going and doing it. So yeah, all of that resonated from the swimming to like the fact that you know have to go through those little steps in order to get prepared for this big opportunity. And yeah, I don't want to miss out on life. I want to be able to do all those things. And it's weird that I also love being by the water, in the water, on a boat, and it don't have the skill or capability to actually swim. But yeah, I'm learning. It'll come.
It's like, and it always bothered me because I wanted to be I wanted to be a swimmer.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
I want to be a stronger swimmer. Now that's my next goal is to become a stronger swimmer. But it sort of was like just this fear. It's like a mix of I want to do this, but I'm terrified of what could happen if something goes wrong. And so it's like getting over that fear. And also, again, the fear of looking stupid, because it's like getting off of work and like changing into a swimsuit and like, doggy paddling around is not necessarily the vision I had for myself as like a strong, powerful woman. But sometimes you just kind of have to like get over yourself.
Yeah, I would have to say like my level of care of those Indians has significantly lowered since hitting the 30s. Like the way that my care is set up, please no, I'm going to acquire the skill so that when the time arises, I'm not needing like a floaty, or I'm not needing someone else, having to rely on someone else. So moving on to our next question, in that realm of being in nature, in water, in what ways were you able to leverage that to overcome any other self-limiting beliefs that you had?
Yeah, it's actually great that the last thing you just said is actually related to what I'm going to say, which was needing a floaty kind of like when you're in water. And what it made me think of like needing help. And that's another big self-limiting belief that I had back then, and actually still have to a certain extent, and I'm trying to get over, is the fact that in my mind, when I ask for help, I'm admitting I'm weak, or I'm like advertising to the world that I'm weak. And it's something that I've gotten a lot better at. I still have a long ways to go, but and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like that as well, because entrepreneurs tend to be very like solo, because we have this like thing inside of us that's like, go off and do this crazy weird thing, and you're gonna have to do it yourself. And so a lot of us are hardwired to not want to accept help. And that's totally still my case, and I still have to I'm still overcoming this. But when I was sailing, because I was still not totally confident in my water skills, and because I was also learning how to sail by literally learning how to tie knots on the boat and move the sail around, I was asking for a lot of help all the time. And so I really had to overcome this idea that people would think less of me if I asked for help. And again, that kind of started small, where it was like, oh, can you show me how to tie the knot? And then it's like, oh, can you show me again? Oh, can you show me one more time? Oh, can you watch while I do it to make sure I'm doing it right? And at that point, it's kind of like very important to get it right. So it's sort of like getting put in those extreme situations in a way makes it easier for you to get over this, because you know that if you are doing it wrong and you don't ask for help, you could endanger everyone else. So it makes it very easy to kind of get over your own mind, and you know that you're being put in sort of a life or death situation. And I think that's what being in nature is about. It kind of like has this magical way of removing all of those like human neuroses from us, because we know that we're in situations where nature doesn't care. Like nature doesn't care about your self-esteem. Nature will kill you if you do something wrong. Like it doesn't care how you feel about it. So you really have to like
doesn't care at all. It does not care about your feelings.
It does not care. Like a bear does not care how many degrees you have, right? Like so you really have to like get over yourself when you're dealing with nature. And it's also, so in a sense, it's also a gift, because it's the ultimate blank slate. because your self-limiting beliefs are kind of your baggage that you bring from like your childhood and from like growing up, and your perceptions of yourself that you've gathered over a certain number of years. Whereas when you're out in nature, there's nothing. There's just you, and there's nature, and there's no past. There's nothing. There's just like the present moment. And I think that's also why people love animals so much, is that animals always live in the present. They don't have baggage. Well, some do. But for the most part, they're very like present minded, right? And as humans, I think we wish we were more like that a lot of the times. And so when you're out in nature, you do get this gift of being like focused on the present moment and having a blank slate and like losing your baggage. So in a way, it's a lot easier to not have self-limiting beliefs out in nature, because the decisions you make are a lot less impacted by what you've done in the past and who you believe you are, and more about, okay, what do I need to do in this moment to be safe, enjoy myself, and enjoy where I am.
You know, it's so amazing that each of these sessions we've had throughout this week have kind of built upon each other. The one just yesterday, we were talking about how nature kind of removes this, you know, whatever perceptions you have of yourself, and it just doesn't care. Like, you exist here and you have to conform to figuring it out in nature, and you have to be in the present in order to, you know, make it, in order to survive, or in order to enjoy it in its full capacity. And so it's really cool that these sessions have kind of built upon themselves, and some of the different topics have really been emphasized and resonate more through days. I had to speak on that.
Yeah, no, and it's fantastic. I mean, it's like, again, depending on where you are in your journey with nature, I didn't see myself as someone who was like, you know, out in nature a lot. And the more I expose myself to nature, the more I appreciate its ability to do that, to give us like this clarity and this freedom from the baggage of who we are. And I think that's, and it's also sort of like at a very primal level, it resonates with you. You really feel like the essence of what it is to be human when you're out in nature, because like that's how we evolved. Like, so you really, and you know, the modern trappings of society are relatively recent if you look at human evolution as a whole. So when you go back out into nature, you're really tapping into like who you are as a human being, and it's very powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's almost like getting back to who you are, and getting back to who you are at your core. And nature is so healing. Yes, it absolutely is. So since we're talking about nature and all of these self-limiting doubts and things, what advice would you give to someone who wants to venture outdoors, or maybe pick up a new skill like swimming, me, for example? What tips would you give them to kind of quiet those self-limiting doubts or work through them?
Yeah. And I think, you know, particularly with professional women, there's specific pointers I can give. Usually by the time you're at the point, if you're a woman and you're in the professional world, you've already heard a lot of other people's opinions about who you are and what you're capable of. It's like you've grown up in a school system where teachers have told you who you are, what you're capable of. You've had your college professors, and then the working world compounds that, because you hear it from your colleague, you hear it from your boss, who's giving you, literally writing down on paper at least twice a year who they think you are, and why that's not good enough, and what you need to improve upon, and you do that for years, and it has an effect on you, like on your perception of yourself, even subconsciously, even if you kind of write it off, which most people don't. So if you're a high achiever, the thing is, all of these other people's opinions, you've been trying to live up to them, right? Like you've been trying to, oh, I got this piece of feedback that I need to work on X, Y, and Z. So now I'm going to work really hard on this because I'm not that type of person, but I need to be that type of person in order to succeed. So, and we're told like how important feedback is. And we kind of take that on board, and we want to be seen as capable. So, and we think the path to being seen as capable is to integrate everyone's opinions about who we are. So the first step is sort of like taking a step back from all of that and unwinding all of that and tapping into who you think you really are. And you do that, and depending on, you know, where you are in your journey with all of this, it might be a very, very quiet voice that sometimes says like, oh, I wish I could do this thing, but I can't because it's too hard, or it's too late for me, or, oh, I wish I could learn this new skill, but I'm so busy and like I'm not very good at that. So usually it's like there's this little voice that is saying what it wants to do, immediately followed by a louder voice that's dismissing that thought. And so it's really about kind of like first listening to yourself. Like what is this little voice inside of you telling you that you want to do, that you haven't been doing? And then asking yourself, well, why haven't you actually been doing it? And is it because, are the excuses that you are providing actually as insurmountable as you think they are? And it goes back to those little baby steps I was telling you about. So, and you kind of have to break it up. Like, so maybe, you know, for example, someone who can't swim, I wouldn't suggest like jumping into the ocean immediately, or like hopping onto a sailboat immediately. And that's usually what trips people up, is like they sort of try to imagine these big leaps, and it doesn't happen in a big leap. It happens in a little baby step. So like the first step can be looking up swimming lessons online. Like that can be the first step. It doesn't even have to be signing up. It's like, and maybe something you look at every week or so, and you say to yourself, oh, it would be cool to do that. And just like sit in that thought. And same thing with like starting a business. Oh, it would be kind of cool to like start my own business. Maybe I'll look up some articles. And that's what I started doing. Like I started listening to entrepreneur podcasts. I did that for like a year before I even thought I could do it. Like I was one of those kinds of people who thought that entrepreneurship was not for someone like me, until I listened to entrepreneurship podcasts for fun for a year. And I was like, oh, maybe I can do this. But it really takes, like, you have to reprogram yourself subtly, because if you try to do it dramatically, like your self-limiting beliefs will like defend themselves, and they will like put up a wall. So you really have to kind of like almost trick yourself into lowering your guard down. So like looking things up online, reading about trips, reading about entrepreneurship, whatever it is that little voice is telling you that you want to do, just start like immersing yourself more and more in it. Immerse yourself. If you want to get more out into nature, like I think my next thing is camping. I've never been camping before. I've always said I'm not a camping person. So it's like, oh, maybe I should like look up what camping, like how do you go camping, or like look up little camping retreats, or maybe I should try glamping, you know, like just little, yes, exactly, glamping, exactly. So like little baby steps. And it's not guaranteed that you're going to like it. Like just because, and that's the other thing, is like, you can't set yourself up just because, you can't set yourself up to think like this is going to change your life, because then you're also going to like be making this like another impossible goal that you have to fill. So it's not about saying like, oh, if only I learned how to swim, or if only I went camping, my whole life would be different. Like, it's not really about that. It's more like trying things. Like maybe I will go camping one day and I will hate it, and that will be okay. Like, because at least I tried it. But maybe I'll go and I'll love it, and I'll like go off the grid, and I'll live in a cabin in the woods for the next 30 years. But like the beautiful part about life is that you get to try all of these things. And there's no one keeping score. So that's the other thing, is like, there's no one like keeping track of things that you tried and failed at, or things you tried and didn't like. That was like something else in my head. Like, you know, you always think like, oh, if I try this and I fail, I'm going to look stupid. But to who? Like, there's no one like watching you.
Yeah.
Even if there is, like, don't care about that. Even if there is someone watching you keeping score, that person,
Yeah.
just ignore that person. And usually it's actually inside of us. Usually we are the ones who are inside of us of our failures. And ignore that person too. So you really have to like raise the volume on the what if voice, like that little voice that you and lower the volume on that voice that keeps score of all these failures.
Yeah, that's so funny. Someone was just sharing with me about how we have this perception, or the advice was like, you don't live on a stage. No one's looking at you all the time. No one cares. It's you that's thinking all of these things. So work on getting out of your head versus focusing on what other people are thinking, or whether or not they're watching you. Nobody cares. And if they do care, they're also going to care when they see you do it. And they're like, oh, wow, she really did that, or wow, I could probably do that too. So like, you still have to show up for yourself, because you're also showing up for other people. I also want to like say this, because I think that it was so cool how your answer around tips to quiet self-limiting beliefs was so strategic. And one of the things that you said was around like setting like baby steps, and the importance of that is really like making sure that the goals you set are actually attainable, because you want to be able to celebrate these small wins so that you can keep going, right? You don't want to set yourself up for failure because you're already working through these self-limiting beliefs. So like you mentioned, like the first step for what was it, swimming, I think you said, was looking up something online. That's something you can absolutely do. And then what's the next step? Like making sure the things that you want to do, you can attain them, and it helps you to build your confidence for each step to like actually do that thing that looks like a big, hairy, scary goal, but you actually can accomplish it because you've done the groundwork leading up to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So in the vein, yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was going to say the interesting thing, going back to kind of like human beings and how we evolve. The interesting thing about being a human is that we're programmed towards like a negative bias, because that's what keeps us alive.
Yeah.
We're programmed to
Yeah.
like see something dangerous and run away from it, because that's what kept us alive back when we were living out in nature. And so, but in modern times, because we're not in danger every day of our lives, like our brains, when we perceive danger in challenging ourselves these days. So it's like we think the worst of new challenges. Sometimes we always imagine like the worst case scenarios. And when you mentioned kind of like thinking strategically, and what I like to do to mitigate that is, well, like think about, okay, well, what is the worst case scenario and how can I prepare for it? And like if I prepare for the worst case scenario, it does a lot to help calm that little negative voice. And I know even if that does happen, it's okay, because I have like plan A through Z. And I'm
That's so me.
Exactly. And then you can give yourself the space to also imagine like the best case scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect way of putting it. And it definitely is yeah, stuff with planning, but definitely a worst case, best case scenario. So I plan for the worst case and then hope for the best, and then just like live in that, enjoy the best case, and be present in it when it does happen, because that's more likely what will happen. And even if it did come out the best case, you're prepared for it, right? So you can still kind of operate in both and still experience and have this great time. Going back to glamping, yeah, that's actually something I saw this year. I said I could go glamping. That's something that will come for a Try and Conquer. We're gonna do a glamping whole retreat, so more on that. Yeah.
Loop on that
in the future.
Yeah, and it's so important because when we have these like self-limiting beliefs that are rooted in fear, that's really all it is at the end of the day. So it's about like, how do you face your fears? And I find that having a plan, it's a great way to like overcome your fears, because once you've thought through, again, that worst case scenario, like fear is rooted in uncertainty. If we've thought through everything that could possibly happen, and we see that scenario that we're so afraid of isn't actually that bad, it helps us to overcome the fear, which then helps us to overcome the self-limiting belief.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap up, I have two more questions for you. One is, what advice can you offer to other working professional women who want to stretch the limits of their corporate job to either embark on a journey around the world like you did, or a journey of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I would say, and I touched upon all of this previously, but I'll kind of like summarize a little bit and add something to it. But it's about like listening to that little voice, that what if voice inside of you, because not everyone's path is the same, and that's kind of what we were talking about before as well. Your path might be the path you're on, and it might be the defined path, and that's awesome. And so also don't let anyone else try to like talk you into a cooler path. Like if you are on your path, that's amazing as well, and celebrate that. And if you're not on your path, like don't feel bad. It's never too late. Like back when I was sort of first getting into entrepreneurship, I also was getting really into neuroplasticity, which is this idea that our brains are constantly capable of learning new things. And talking about people who were in their 80s getting PhDs and things like that, which commonly people tend to think if you haven't done it by the time you're 40, let alone 50, like you're probably never going to do it. Whereas I am probably going to be trying new things up until my very last day, because what else are we here for but to try new things? So listen to that little what if voice, and also protect it. because it is atypical to kind of be the kind of person who tries new things all the time and gets out of your comfort zone. And there will be probably people who are telling you it's a bad idea, even if that person's yourself. And also it may come from other sources. Like, I know for me, it definitely came from other sources as well. People like, oh, are you sure you want to do that? Like, why would you want to give up a nice job when you can, like, you know, kind of, you've already made it. Just like, you know, don't rock the boat. Like, why would you want to do something scary? So you have to protect this little, like, whatever it is you are trying to do in the world, like while it's still an idea, you have to protect it because it's very delicate and it can get crushed by you or by someone else very easily. So while you're out exploring and taking your baby steps, like, I would say, don't expose it to everyone. It's okay. You don't have to tell everyone everything. You can be selective. And you know the people in your life who are going to be supportive versus the people in your life who are going to be giving you good advice that is going to crush your dream. Like, so it's time to just be really cognizant of what it means to, like, share your dream with people. And if you need to keep it to yourself for the time being, keep it to yourself, because you're going to have to, like, protect it until it's strong enough to protect itself. Now I tell everyone everything because over the years, now I know I've proven that I could do what I wanted to do. So I have no issue. But if I had been telling people what I wanted to do, like when I was first imagining it, like, someone's opinion about it could have killed that dream. So be very protective of your dreams, I'd say is the first piece of advice. And then second piece of advice is don't be afraid to invent your own path. And that was something, Chasma, that you had said, and I totally co-sign that, is you might be inventing something totally new in the world, and that is okay. You don't have to do something that's already been done before. I think especially now with technology, we have the chance to create our own ways of doing things. And we can create whatever we want, basically. And a lot of the, like with me being, I'm kind of like on emerging technologies, and it's insane to think of the things that we are capable of that would have seemed totally out of the realm of possibility 10 years ago. So it makes me think, what are we going to be capable of in 10 years from now? So if you have like a totally crazy idea, hold on to that, nurture it, baby step it until it's reality, and like, don't let anyone talk you out of it.
Thank you for that advice. I wish I had known that maybe 2 years ago when I first started envisioning and ideating for Try and Conquer. It was at the time called something totally different, but it was very infantile, and it absolutely was too pliable and not strong enough to withstand some of the outside forces and opinions, and it almost did not exist, or would have existed as something completely different that didn't make me happy and didn't solve some of the problems that are so near and dear to me, which is the outdoors and providing a way for women of color to explore the outdoors as a way of healing. So that's amazing advice. It resonated with me personally, and I'm sure that it will resonate with so many other folks who listen to this session. Is there anything else that you would love to share before we wrap up?
No, just that I really want to be part of your next glamping trip. I really thank you for putting this together. Before, in preparing for this session, I didn't realize to what extent nature was actually part of my journey and helping me to become who I am today. So I do thank you for bringing this to light. The fact that, getting outdoors, getting into nature, it challenges us in ways that we're often not challenged. And it will change you in ways that you don't expect. So that has just been really fantastic. And it makes me really want to get back out in nature now. So I think
you absolutely should. You absolutely should with Try and Conquer and with our glamping. It's not all glamping, by the way. It'll be some like for real roughing it, but it will be a nice glamping component added to it.
So I'll start with glamping and then I'll kick it up in high gear with roughing.
Yeah. Sounds good. Those baby steps coming into full effect. It comes full circle. Awesome. Thank you again so much, Jeannette. This was an amazing way to celebrate International Women's Day. I fully enjoyed this talk. For other folks who are interested in learning about the other talks or hearing them, The replays will be available later this week, but you can also go onto our website, which is tryxconquer.com, and you can access our app right now at tryxconquer.app.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely.